you so much. We're just honored to be here, to be a part of this IoT Slam. Appreciate the community doing this for us. I'm Sean Mccoy. I'm the Solutions Manager for Worker Health, Safety, and Security at CBT, and I'm joined by my colleague. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, equally, I'm very happy to be here, and it is an honor. I'm Charlie Stack, Chief Technologist for CBT on the operational technology side.
Yeah, so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up, and bear with me for the proverbial technology introduction. We'll make sure, Charlie, can you see that to make sure everybody else can see it as well?
Yes, sir.
All right, awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to talk about how to implement a successful IoT strategy using some context and some experience specifically that Charlie has. And just to preface it a little bit, the idea is I'm going to set the stage here with a few slides as to try to hopefully explain and lay out some groundwork of some of the pain points that all of us are familiar with, and then really tap into Charlie and say, all right, what are we going to do about all this? And so with that, again, thank you for this invitation. It's a Friday. Hope everybody's enjoying their Friday. We'll try to make this as exciting and fun and try not to use too many buzzwords to make this thing go through, but really excited about being here. So I do want to start the whole idea of this, this idea behind planning and strategy and things of this nature is mainly because as we're going through this digital transformation, it's disruptive. It causes change, and it really puts us in a position of what in the heck are we going to do about it? And so we're going to start out with the proverbials, and that is in regards to challenges and what are these things that we're seeing. And I will tell you, as somebody who it's my job to know all about the hardware and software that's out there in the world. If you're keeping up with it like I am, you know just how fast it's changing, how fast it's becoming possible where we didn't even know that something could do that. If you're keeping up with the news, in the last week, RealWear, who for years has been a hardware supplier, who we all know probably came out and said, hey, we're doing a software now with this RealWear cloud-based service because it's necessary as the evolution of requirements are changing. And so to keep up with these things, and really what does this mean to us overall, requires us, it can be a bit overwhelming. If you're like me, while you're into it, you're excited, it's awesome to learn about, there's a lot of cool things. We also know that cool doesn't get the job done always, and it definitely doesn't last. And so what's the real meat on the bone that's happening out there, and how do we stay on top of it, given all that's coming? Then once you do, when you integrate it and implement it and adopt it, it can be cool, but it doesn't always last. And how do we get something that we can use every day that really provides value and is worth all this disruption that we go through and all of these changing, all this anxiety? And how do you know where to go? And how do you get people on board to believe in it besides just those that are the champions? How do we create the coworkers that really believe and really integrate this into what they do? Because when it happens, you think about things like email and smartphones, it can really, really change the dynamics of what we do and improve it. And then there's also challenges around basic stuff. We kind of get ahead of ourselves. We run into this all the time with our company around things like connectivity. You can have all the devices in the world you want, but if you don't have the bandwidth, if you don't have the infrastructure set up to really make that work, and nobody bothered to ask that question. We've had customers before, lots of hardware, and then they find out that they don't have the connectivity and the infrastructure to support it. And of course, cybersecurity and integration on the IT side, what does it all mean now that you can put it all together and you have all this data? And then how do I make sure that I'm not on the front page of the news being ransomware and the rest of these things, which are critical points that are needed to be understood in this whole process that sometimes we can get past and not realize that we're forgetting. And then why are we doing this? What's the benefit? There's you can talk about boosting profits and business process optimization. These are all really, really cool buzzwords that we come up with. But in the end, there are real benefits to this. Maintaining and monitoring equipment. How does this help us in the big scheme of things in terms of, we've seen this with our own customers, being able to I talk about the ear. If you've known somebody who's got the ear for like a compressor or an ear for a motor, and they can just know that something's wrong with it. Well, that's great. And we've seen this work over time, and there is some truth to it, but it's that one person, and you can't amplify them across all your pieces of equipment all the time. And technology can come in and be that person constantly. We see this in that area. Real-time communications and remote operations and things of that nature, subject matter experts even, but also we've seen this in our side with one of our customers that had had to do a semi-annual audit every 6 months, flew in from Switzerland. And now they use remote mentor, they use remote connected worker to do this every 3 months from Switzerland. You save on time, you save on expenses, and you also increase the quality of that audit. And that's what something like real-time communications or remote communications has allowed us to do. And then kind of in my world, it's a little bit of the newer world for a lot of us in terms of that, outside of the operational edge, that the personal edge and what that means to people. That they're human beings that are doing these things at the end of the day, and how do we keep them safe, and how do we keep them in line in terms of going home at the end of the day and doing their job well. The things that are happening with ergonomics and biometrics right now that not only allow us to recognize what is causing lost time incidences, which is overexertion and fatigue. Well, how do you know that? The old days that I came from, where you just kind of grin and bear it, or get it done, get her done, or don't say anything and just be tough. They're going away because they really don't work overall. And there's an opportunity for technology to come in and tell us what's about to happen and prevent those injuries, and not just show scars on where you were tough enough to take it. What if we can avoid that altogether? Those things, these are real benefits. All these are examples of benefits that are real and that are tangible and that are available right now. And then on top of all this is something I was just having a conversation before this about, it's going to take a village, whether it's an internal village of having a variety of inputs, a variety of people, engineers, technologists, solutions managers, and architects. There's this solution by committee, and it's not just a single transaction, especially in our world. You can't just say, hey, here's the one thing you need, and then you're done. It takes expertise to some degree or another inside of a company, but you can't just stop there. You have external resources, places like the IoT community, National Safety Council is one that comes to mind, or just different organizations that either are a standard for the industry or an industry, or for like an area like technology. Where do we go? Who do we talk to? And then partners. And then there's companies that are out there that we can really benefit from. The days of the old Microsoft, we're going to have our language and nobody else can speak it, and you either play with us and play with our medium, or else you can't play nice at all. We're changing that. It's everybody's open, everybody's agnostic. It's the buzzword I hear, and I personally say all the time at conferences. It's like, hey, we're going to play nice in the sandbox because we all got to come together and make this thing work. And that really helps those individual companies that are super focused on some of these amazing technologies, going back to that, but they're super good at that one thing, and they may not, and so to be able to amplify what they do through partnerships and through groups that can kind of help filter through some of the things that we need, in addition to just like a plan or a strategy, but how can these technologies really make that individual, that one particular solution that much better? You got to bring everybody to the table as far as that goes. And then I got to give a little bit of a shout out. There's you think to yourself, you go to do this. All right, well, we'll go back to the old days of KPIs and ROIs, and we know what we're going to measure. And I was thinking about this conference, and I don't know if any of y'all follow Jeff Winter. He's I've connected with him and a couple of conversations with him, and seems to always has really pertinent, challenging information. And he posted something a couple of weeks ago, and this cartoon stood out to me in relation to that, because the idea is, okay, Sean, well, great. We'll go come up with this project management solution. We'll go through the typical ways we do things, and then we'll find out if this thing really works, and we'll know what we're doing, and we'll be able to measure something as simple as something we've taken for granted on what these KPIs could be and what they've always kind of been. And Jeff threw out this really interesting kind of push, like, hey, maybe the problem is in the way we're measuring. Maybe there's an opportunity to improve that. In this cartoon, which really, I think, sums it up, where you can have all this data, you can have all these KPIs that you think you may know, but what do they actually mean, and what are they telling you, and how do you know what they're telling you, and what made you think that was something? And these were the 5 questions that he, or 5 topics he kind of put up there for your reference of, how do I know what I'm measuring, and is that what I should? And so I think it's an opportunity. It's been back to the disruption. It can be a bit overwhelming, but these are critical questions that we should ask as we approach this. And so all that lends itself to kind of this gap, this vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. So it becomes, well, all right, well, so what do we do? How do we address this? How do we approach it? And that is really where I'll bring in Charlie. You're next. And all right, buddy. So all that said, feel free to comment on anything I said, as I'd mentioned to you earlier. And then really after that is, all right, buddy, what do we do, and what strategy, what plan of somebody who's done this and seen this succeed and has really gone through the trenches in some of these transformations of different types? Where do we go?
Well, to just look back on some of the things you said a little bit, we're going to be forced to make transition whether we want to or not. I mean, there's more people on the planet. There's more people using a limited, what seems to be a limiting amount of resources. And it's not just that. We can't be, if you're a baby boomer, you can't be a stick in the mud. You've got to change, because if those of us who have children, young children, 20 somethings, even 30 somethings, and one of the things I've noticed in those groups is that they've already adopted change as a continuum for going forward, for making things better. And another thing that those same groups realized is that change is, to be successful in change, you have to be collaborative. You have to reach out and talk to everybody and talk to all parties, interested and disinterested. There's no such thing as a disinterested party anymore. Everybody has skin in the game, and you're not going to win. We're not going to win whether we're talking about climate change. We're not going to win whether we talk about getting off the planet. We're just not going to win if we don't talk about fighting disease, or improving the human condition overall, if we don't consider all opinions and take into account the whole of the human condition in terms of making a change. And now the fact of going digital just makes that change, in my opinion, a lot faster, a lot simpler, and frankly easier to do. But like anything else, you have to accept it, and finding how to do this right now, because again, let's face the reality, there's still a lot of baby boomers in the workforce that are kind of running the show for us. And yeah, there's a lot of up and comers, and they'll have, as time moves on, take their place. But we're fighting a battle against losing time. We have to make this digital switch and digital conversion, and we have to take advantage of it now. And we're seeing, some of us are even experiencing the advantages of it already. Things like targeted gene therapy, things that, a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago were impossible. Now, because of connectivity, now because of the ability to communicate and to bring everybody together, because of the internet, we have the ability to pull things together and do things safer, faster, and better, again, for the overall human condition. Now, as far as implementing a strategy, that of course requires some things which are mainstays in today's business. I mean, having a sponsor, you've got to have someone that supports the movement, the digital movement forward, that supports whatever it is we're trying to do. And in order to do that, we have to not just do what it is we want to do, but we also have to provide the protections, the security, the necessary automation to control all this movement, all this digital movement, all this data management, if you will. And again, people have to feel comfortable with the change. If, like I said, our children, they're comfortable with the change right now because they're living it, breathing it, and doing it every single minute of every day of their lives. Their parents, grandparents, to be sure, are kind of like looking and go, well, if we take 20 or 30 years to think about this, that'll be okay. We don't have 20, 30 years anymore. Some people will tell you we don't have 3 years or 3 months. We've got to be moving along this improvement and do it now, but at the same time, convincing people that the automation, the security of their data or the data and protections are there for everybody. And then, of course, once we address all those precursors and kind of have everybody in the room all ready to go, then we have to make connections. We have to not just talk to each other, but it's one thing to talk to somebody that thinks like you, but we need to talk about diversity. We need to take advantage of the differences that exist in society today, whether it's cross-cultural, whether it's cross-national. It doesn't matter what the cross is, what the difference is, but we have to make those connections in order to fully evaluate what the betterment, how we all look at something for our betterment, and to make the most of it and to achieve the success we're going to achieve. And again, that's the way in. That's the strategy.
So I'm just, for the sake of those that are watching, I'm going to stop this share. Tell me if you want me to pull it back up just so that they're not staring at the same screen and we can kind of put ourselves up there. So give me a second to do that. But I wanted to tie in a little about what you said about the IIoT sponsor. So I mean, that's a big part of the addressing of this opportunity. And we see a lot of times, or a lot of companies will, they'll create a position, innovation, something, some sort of person who's kind of like a pseudo, maybe that's what they're going to go do, is find these kinds of things. But sometimes that isn't necessarily enough. Like you want somebody. So when you say sponsor, my understanding is you're talking more about somebody who's really really a champion within the industry, within a company, to understand that this is a solution that we want to go forward on, or some idea of pursuing it, and really becomes the force that kind of helps that transformation. And you said that you felt like a digital transformation would be easier, and I'd really like to know why you think that. But kind of go back to the sponsor, really help. So who do you go to? Or is it a position you should create, or is it more of a collective, or do you go find somebody who becomes kind of the team captain and brings them along whether they like it or not? Or kind of talk a little bit more about the sponsor side.
It's any and all the above. In the ideal situation, you've got an over the horizon thinker that is part of your organization. And if that person happens to be the driver and the person in charge, you're extremely lucky. If not, and that person is in your organization, then as an owner or sponsor or decision maker, you can find those people out in your organization and take advantage of their ability to see beyond the closed door and to imagine what life would be like if. And that could relate directly to a line of business you're in. It could relate to something as simple as how your employees are at work. It just depends. The number of ideas that deep thinkers think about are as numerous as stars. But again, it takes someone either like that or someone in a position to enable it to happen. You don't have to be smart to be a decision maker or to be a deep thinker. What you have to do is in a position to be able to make those decisions. If you're a board member, a company owner, a leader of any type, and you don't have to be a titan in industry either. You can be a line supervisor in a company and have innovation occur in your piece of whatever process it is your company's involved in, and you'd be surprised how that effect of just being able to be known as, boy, he lets us take our ideas up. That kind of that's infectious. That kind of cross-pollination occurs at all levels. I mean, again, I keep going back to our kids because I love getting on the podium to teach classes these days, because you can see the lights in their eyes. They're thinking, they know, they're living this day-to-day change, this constant improvement, this living on the edge, if you will, and forward moving, and they don't like things to slow down. So that's the kind of dynamic you look for, whether it's a child in school, and who knows, that's maybe your next football quarterback, or whether you're a titan in industry and you're just in a position to be able to enable thinkers to move forward, or in a rare case, you yourself are one of those individuals.
So to dive on that a little bit more, so can you, in your history, can you think of somebody or a team of people that were sponsors that succeeded, and kind of some of the characteristics around those folks and how they addressed it that you saw actually happen out from a specific standpoint?
Well, I watched for 3 years that I was part of the process of watching. I watched for 3 years. I watched an organization that is global. It's a company that's global, involved in the food industry, and they control almost 75% of the market that they happen to be in. They are on 6 continents, and anyway, just huge presence. And they were trying to come out of, for example, the Stone Age. In other words, they were using people in the fields with sickles to do, down in Brazil to do harvesting, and conditions where, compared to America or Europe, were horrible. So, but they looked at that, and just were trying to get their hands around, how do we bring that whole collective together so we are one company? so that if you happen to be living and working in the United Kingdom, your brother or sister down in Brazil, it doesn't have, such a horribly lower experience living because they happen to be in Brazil. So they struggled with technology and how to bring things together. And yes, there were the stalwarts in the company that said, no, we don't want to do this. We want to be our own. But yet the central group, four brothers and a sister, decided that they were going to embark on a technology that would unify all of their business units around the world, and not unify them just in business, but unify them in human resources, unify them in the experience of being an employee for this corporation. And they wanted that experience to be called a world experience, not just a country experience where you happen to be born to and be lucky or not lucky. So that whole investment cost them $18 million. Now you may say, well, that's not a whole lot of money. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for a company to take a leap and not knowing where they were going, but they had these owners, this owner family generation that decided, and they in between age 60 and 70 all decide, no, we want this and this has to happen. They didn't know how to make it happen, but they spent quite a long time looking for a solution. They found a solution. It was with a global data digital technology company provider, and they set about doing this. And this is where I came into it. And they asked themselves, hey, we want to do this, but we don't know how to get there. And we've selected this company as our business partner. Can you help us? So we set about doing that, and they gave us carte blanche to do it because they wanted it done, and they wanted it done in 3 years. Well, it got done in 2.5. So, and it was, we all felt good at the end of that, because again, the person in Brazil, now they weren't doing it with sickles anymore. They were doing it with the same machines that they were doing it up here in the United States with. And so there was that elevational level, if you will. People felt better. The people in Europe, the workers in Europe and in Africa and in United States looked at South America, at the market, or their comrades in Brazil, and saw how they had been elevated. They felt good about that because they had an input. It was a global project, and they had an input to say, here's not how we just want to be treated. Here's how we want our brothers and sisters in Brazil to be treated, simply because we're all part of the same global family, and we want to do, there was this collaborative experience, and all that family did was something very simple. They put up the money, they selected a partner, and then they brought in a doer to make it go and get done. Unfortunately, that was me. And then they said, hey, now make it work. Now cook the pie, if you will. And we made the pie. Actually, the employees cooked the pie. 30,000 or so employees cooked the pie. And now they're one of the best places to work in the globe.
And these are all things we hear sometimes, and it's almost that too good to be true, or it sounds like, yeah, that seems super obvious. So can you help us along that path instead of getting so far past the story of, well, everybody's now singing Kumbaya and everything else is wonderful, which is possible. But so now that you've identified your group, your sponsor, these are the people, and there's a commitment, like you said, both internally from an emotional level, a financial level, all the other levels. Where do you start? I mean, where's the first place? Do you go with the biggest pain point, the squeakiest wheel? And then kind of like, okay, well, great. So, but how do we plan that to get to that end point?
You have to have a map. The very first thing that you have to ask yourself, as traditional as it may sound, is, where do you want to go? What do you want to be? What do you want to be, and what do you want that to look like? Because if you can't do that, then you're going to be going down. You're going to be taking right turns, left turns, up turns, down turns. You're going to stumble when you don't have to stumble. You're not going to study because you don't know. You're going to be satisfied for whatever it is you get, no matter what the effort is. You have to be. But if you have an idea of where you want to finish, and some people in the loftier acumen of academia say you have to have a vision. Okay, so. But I like to say, where do you want to be? And as soon as you decide where you want to be and what you want to be, and work backwards, everything else falls into place. Now, after that, you have to know exactly where you are, and you have to be honest. And you say, okay, and measure the delta. And when you get that difference, then you can set about realistically now making a plan which is much collaboration of the affected group as possible to what does that realistic plan look like? I mean, what kind of resources can we throw at it? What are we willing to live with while we're executing the plan? And so once you have the endpoint on both ends, you have the delta measured, you've decided now on a plan, and none of this is easy. It takes time and discussion and collaboration, agreement and disagreement, but respect. You've got to have respect for each other throughout the whole process. There's no such thing as bad news or bad commentary. If it's honest, it's relevant. And again, the person or group deciding to do the change has to be also set up those expectations for honesty and respect at the same time, or again, special interest will take you where you don't want to go.
So you mentioned something about conflict, because sometimes we can hear these stories and the impression, and we see the videos, and everybody's in agreement, and everything's moving forward, and progress happens, and adoption happens, and people are high-fiving. But that's rarely the case in a human endeavor of any kind. Okay. So relative to the plan, how do you strategize, or how do you deal with conflict resolution and difference of opinion, or like, I really think we should adopt this technology, and you're like, yeah, I don't think so. But it's like, okay, and you're relative to that, how do we get through that part?
Like anything else, one of the essential skills, if you will, in that transition of change and acceptance is to have clear identification of who are leaders, what is a leader, and what is a follower. And when you set that up, you also incur rules that come with either role. The leader, for example, is not totalitarian, not dictatorial, not my way or the highway. And the follower equally has say, has input. And so the leader respects the follower respects the leader. And one of the essential things that has to be agreed to is at the end of the day, when we've considered everything and a decision is made, everyone, follower and leader, all go in the same direction. Now, I will tell you that sometimes, I mean, we're human beings. You're going to pick a wrong direction. But once you go down the direction and the minute you discover alteration is necessary or adjustment, then you regroup because you've got the same respectful kind of professional, a human to human relationship. And you agree that, hey, this didn't work. We need to try something else. So you do the whole thing again, or maybe you make a slight deviation. It doesn't matter. But again, you do the same kind of collaboration, the same kind of respect. And then we go, okay, we made this adjustment. And you would be surprised how many organizations will tell you there's a phrase called the meeting after the meeting, where you have the meeting and the television cameras are on and you go, wow, kumbaya, look at that handshaking and high-fiving. Okay, the cameras get turned off, the doors get locked, and the executives turn around and look at each other, and the CEO or the president goes, okay, let's talk about what this is really going on here. And then they air it out. But in that airing out, in that period of honesty, there's, again, respect and just mutual cooperation, and everybody understands their role. And then the direction is what the direction is.